Mindset matters. Character counts. What we choose to focus on each day is everything. Pete Jones presents the Good in the Head Podcast. I promise to infect your mind in a way you will appreciate. Pete Jones. And now to the Good in the Head Podcast. Here is Pete.
Hey everyone, this is Pete Jones with the Good in the Head Podcast. I invite you to go to my website at www.goodinthehead.com and check it out. If you click on the menu, there will be many different things to explore. My daily perspective shift is something that has transformed my life in amazing ways. There's a habit hacking challenge, different things to try out, try on like a winter coat, right? Like, I don't like that one. I'll try this one. There's a lot on there. I've also got some books for sale. I hope that you enjoy your experience on the website and especially in this podcast with Camille Miskin. It is incredible. I can't wait to share it with everyone. Please like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with everyone you know. This topic is one that affects everyone, any human, and it's important to, I think, listen to this and have this information because it really empowers one to have different conversations and think differently on the topic of death and dying, what to do to be prepared. She covers so much, and she has been a huge help to me just by recording this podcast with me. I hope you enjoy. All right. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode on the Good in the Head podcast. I'm super excited about today's guest, Camille Miskin. Welcome to the show, Camille.
Thank you.
I'm going to call you Cammy.
Yeah.
We're used to that. Cammy is the founder of Channeling Expansion Counseling, and she's a licensed grief therapist and dedicated death doula, guiding individuals and their families in preparing for a peaceful, intentional, and compassionate end-of-life experience. Her work brings comfort, clarity, light, and dignity to one of life's most universal and often the most avoided conversations. She was recently a featured guest on Girls Camp podcast, which I highly recommend checking out, and I'll have the link below in the comments section. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Kimmy.
Yeah, I'm excited. Honored.
Thank you. I'd like to get into, first of all, sort of your life experience, some of the things you've gone through, how you've navigated it, what drew you to this calling that you now have, and everything that we can learn about you, as you were growing up and going through college.
Yeah, it's a bit mystery how I found this, just because a lot of people get to this stage either through nursing or experiencing a near end of life experience themselves. I can just say that I had a really good teacher in college who was an emergency room chaplain. And she was teaching a sociology of health course, and she just would not shut up about death. Uh, and I think she offered that we could come and shadow her at the hospital.
Hmm.
And I was the only one that signed up.
Really?
And then, and then I just kept going because it was just so interesting to be around her. And I liked how calm she was around death, which I mean, nurses and doctors are also just as calm, but almost the psychological calm. And
Hmm.
she didn't offer any medical support to anyone she visited. It was a different type of medicine. And so after that, I saw a video online on Facebook or something back in 2019, and it was from Alua Arthur, and she was holding like a workshop about preparing for the end of life, and it was kind of the first time I'd ever heard about death doula, just that term.
Hmm.
And I remember watching that video, and I turned to my husband. I said, I'm going to do that. And he's like, okay, well, you're getting your degree in something else. And that's not, I mean, I don't know how people get that job. And I said, I don't know either, but I'm going to do it. Um,
Huh,
and
just
so,
like that.
yeah, then fast forward to like, I think it was 2023, 2024. I was her first training cohort for death doulas. I was her first in-person training cohort. And I think as a young person, it's not that I really liked death, but the only thing I can really remember is that when, my mom would do something involved in a church that we went to, she would do the meal post graveside service for the families, and I would just be there. And I really liked how adults behaved at funerals.
Hmm.
I liked that suddenly they were more gentle and kind. I liked that they sang more often. They cried. I loved seeing adults cry. It was like the coolest thing to see as a kid because I felt like they were just like me.
Hmm.
And so I didn't know how to call it grief, that I liked sitting in grief with other people. But I just remember that being the only thing I could really point to say that, now that I once had a witchy type of person just call me, oh, like, oh, you use the dark feminine. And I'm like, whoa, well,
Huh,
cool,
interesting.
sure. Which she's like, dark doesn't mean bad. It means that
Right.
you're able to sit with something heavier
Mhm.
comfortably without getting all squirmy and weird. And I said, I don't know how. I am quite comfortable there. And it just helps me connect with something bigger than me. And as a kid, you do that naturally. So anyway, long story short, I did go on to get my degree. I first majored in sociology in my undergrad, so I learned a lot about people and why they do, and we did talk about death and cultures and things like that. And then I got my more, pointed degree in social work. And so I was a hospice social worker, and that cemented it. So I visited people all over Tucson. I lived in Tucson, Arizona for my years going to college, about 4 years with my husband. And man, that was wild. I drove all over that valley, weird stories. So that time witnessing real deaths was what I needed to get the confidence that it really was meant for me to be a beholder of death.
Hmm.
Then after that, I just had to, learn how to be a social worker. And then in an internship, I reluctantly took a position as a just private practice therapist. I never thought I would be. I wanted to do medical social work. I thought I'd be working in hospitals. Um, but I ended up being really good at therapy. So I stuck, and then I said, well, I can't forget my dedication to grief. So then I became a disciplined grief therapist. And then I still, people, it's the, what do we call it? It's kind of the forgotten population, those who are dying at home,
Mhm.
those who have chronic illness and terminal illness. They weren't going to come into my office. So then I still had to find a side hustle where I could go into people's homes and serve my community. And that's where I became a more official death doula. So it's been years of just learning that I'm into this. And, people think that death doulas they only wear black and they wear thick eyeliner and they, visit graveyards. And I'm like, I love a good graveyard. It, what people don't know is that when you talk about death, you become a very happy person. So even as a grief therapist, I'm a very happy person.
Hmm.
Even though I do actually work a lot with suicide as well. And
Interesting.
really, really hard things. So,
That's something that I've had some experience with in the past. I've lost a few close people to suicide,
yeah.
and I don't know why I get teared up talking about that, but I still do, and I'm okay with that now. Um, can you tell us some of the experiences that you've had along those lines. And then let's go to some of the crazy stories while you were in Tucson driving around house to house.
Yeah, I usually think of one when I talk about if, and by the way, if anyone is listening and they're curious if they're called to death work, you're called. I mean, you can't fake it. It's just something you're magnetized to in the same way that people are magnetized towards just anything they do. People say the same about being a birth doula. They just can't stop thinking about it. Um, and there was one time when, so this is where it gets a little funky. I actually was at this time also a chaplain. So
Huh.
I was working as a social worker for a hospice company. And then a hospice team is interdisciplinary, meaning that we all have different roles, but we come together and serve the same client and purpose. Um, and it's cool because hospice is kind of this shining light of the medical healthcare, spending umbrella. Because if you do the right paperwork, which that's a social worker's job to help get that set up, it's cared for. The government found out that if they paid for people to die at home, in some states and some hospitals, if you were to go to the hospital and die of natural causes, the debt that you would owe that hospital goes away. So then the hospital can't even get paid for someone who's naturally just going to die in their hospital. So they'll say, hey, we want people who actually can give us money.
Sure, they got to stay in business, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, whatever, it's capitalism. So it's
Yep.
like,
Yep.
um, hospitals and the government kind of work together to make sure that there is some good funding for people to die at home, which awesome. It is a bitch to get all that set up.
Hmm.
And then people think that hospice is just, I don't know, like some grim reaper thing. Like the hospice talk is really scary.
Hmm.
So on average, people only are on hospice between like 3 and 15 days. But I mean, the definition of hospice is that you have about 6 months to live, and people graduate out of hospice all the time. So they're just afraid that technically within hospice, you're not fighting your disease anymore. You're just doing comfort measures and a lot of pain management. And I mean, they bring the hospital bed to your house. I mean, the volunteers I had at my hospice, they played the violin. They come and they do arts and crafts with you. I mean, it's a lovely team, but people are so afraid of if they accept hospice, they're gonna die. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not wrong. It's just that people are so afraid. And then now the unfortunate part that I mentioned is that they only get that service for about 3 days because they waited until the very end.
Okay.
So it was really weird because every time I would say, I'm a hospice social worker, it's like I was some, angel of death or something. And then at the time, I uh, I had that professor that was a chaplain, and she was a Harvard trained chaplain. Like, this is no like soft discipline. This, I mean, usually go to an official seminary or some intensive schooling to become a chaplain. These are real positions. And I really wanted to do that. So I actually went to one of my ecclesiastical leaders and I said, hey, I want to become a chaplain. And they kind of laughed at me and they said, no, we have other people that do that. We have missionaries and specific elder missionaries assigned to hospitals that visit people. And I
Hmm.
said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I want to become a chaplain. And they said, don't waste your breath. And so,
Interesting.
yeah, and I mean, the church that I grew up in believes a bit of a patriarchal priesthood holding um, structure. So I'm a woman and I couldn't have used a certain type of priesthood, which I think is like, well, we're not going to get into that. But I got snarky, and I think in that moment I was walking out of the office and I was like, I think I made a little deal with God, and I was like, try me. Just I, if you think it's cool that I want to do this, you give it to me. And then I let it flow out of my mind, because I then also was trying to be supportive of my church and just say, you know what, fine. There's
Hmm.
people who do this, whatever. I trust you. Then not even kidding, it was like 2 days later, my supervisor at the hospice facility, well, it was a hospice company. It
Hmm.
was a facility. We would go to people's homes. They came to me and said, hey, our chaplain broke his leg or something. I don't know what happened, but he couldn't do what he was doing. He was an awesome chaplain. And they said, you're religious, right? Can you fill in? And I said, sure,
What?
I'll be a chaplain.
What a synchronicity. That's like a direct
Yeah.
sign, I think. That's
Yeah.
wild. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So then I was like, sure. And then they said, cool. All we'll need is a letter from an ecclesiastical leader. And I said, okay. And then
Huh.
I didn't know that I was going to have to be interviewed by the headquarters in Salt Lake. So I went through the full process of becoming a fully endorsed chaplain with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So
Okay.
that was very interesting. And they just wanted to know that, if I was repping some sort of religion, that I would be doing it uh, correctly or something.
According to their boundaries and expectations, right?
Yeah. And at the time, that was no big deal.
Cool.
I don't have the tattoos yet. Um, so, so I was like, baller, cool. And then I never once visited an LDS home,
Huh.
because like the leader said, I was not a priesthood holding missionary. I just I wasn't a bishop, things like that. But I visited lots of homes. I visited those who are Buddhists, humanists. I visited tons of Catholics, because in southern Arizona you have it's closer to the border of Mexico. I was in kind of that territory where Catholicism was a little more prominent.
Sure.
And I remember walking into these homes and they didn't even blink an eye that I was a woman. Um, and so there was one. So I was randomly called into this home as a chaplain, but I had just been there the day before as a social worker. So they were a little confused. Um, like, I do both, I guess. And then um, all I did was facilitate an opportunity to sing and pray. I didn't give official blessings. I didn't do anything that didn't feel authentic. And all I wanted to do was just hear how these people wanted to hold space for their person. But I was there and I could immediately feel something was heavy, but not in a bad way in the room. And so I got there. I was talking to just the single daughter, and her mom was actively dying on the bed. And active death is something we don't see very often. It's not portrayed in Hollywood. It's not something that, unless you've been, it's the same way, like, have you seen a live birth? And it's like, no, not until you are their spouse or you're their, maybe a kid gets to see their mother give birth, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
That's something that the more we don't see real death in society, we are taught to fear it and to put it behind a curtain and let a doctor take care of it. But I learned more and more that the more comfortable people are in their home around their family, the better a death can go. Same as a birth. Things kind of go a little bit smoother if things are comfortable and familiar and things like that. So things were very sweet. The daughter was talking to her mom a lot. And then suddenly it's as if I had a hand push the small of my back towards the mom. Like, I felt this huge push to be near her. And then I had visited the woman, and believe it or not, she actually was able to speak a tiny bit when I had been there the day before. Her death process was quite quick. and you could tell she was actively dying, just because, well, and I'll kind of name some of the symptoms of, not symptoms, that's the wrong word, but just signs of active death. And it's mostly that they have kind of the death rattle, the active breathing, that it looks labored,
Hmm.
but they're breathing just fine. It's just that the body really doesn't need to breathe much faster. It's all of the organs are going much slower. I once had a like a nurse show me with some. I don't touch the patients as a hospice social worker, so I had a nurse show me that if you put the stethoscope to their stomach, you actually won't even hear the digestion sounds anymore, because there's no need to digest anything. And people get the wrong idea that they want to be feeding their people, their loved ones, their favorite foods, and well, they're not eating anymore, and it's a big problem. But if they were to eat all the way up till death, it would be very painful.
Hmm.
So,
I've heard that.
it's something that a lot of women who love others through food have a hard time with. And so you can go, you know, 3, 4 weeks without food. You can only go 1 to 2 without any water. Now, if you're in a hospital, they're going to give you artificial hydration and nutrition.
And keep you hydrated and in pain, in other words.
Yeah, and I mean it's like it bypasses the digestive tract a little bit because it's through IV, but it's like I don't know. I mean we keep them super comfortable, and you'll watch a hospice nurse first do it and then show you if you're a family caregiver, that also the muscles that keep our mouths shut, they relax. So no one really thinks about this, but when someone is actively dying, the jaw is open. And that means your mouth breathing, and your mouth gets very dry. So you just take this little blue sponge on a stick, you dip it in some water and sometimes a solution that retains the hydration, and you wet their lips and their mouth so they're very comfortable. And so this woman was in a sweet death position, which means that her mouth was very open. She had labored breathing. Her hair had been combed. She was clean. Um, but there is, even in my training, they talked about a little bit of a sweet smell of death. It is
Hmm.
real. It is very, I didn't quite believe it, but it's real. And then it gets more prominent after their spirit leaves their body. It's pretty interesting. So, anyway, I had only been to this woman's home once. I put my hand on her chest to feel her breath. And then I had a little bit of a spiritual nudge, I guess, to call the daughter's attention and say, hey, I need you to come over. Your mother's dying. That was a bit bold of me to say. One, you're not even supposed to say that as a nurse,
Hmm.
because they'll ask all the time, how long do we have? And the
Hmm.
nurse says, oh, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple
Yeah,
days.
nobody knows. Yeah.
Yeah, but in this moment, I said, your mother is dying. We're going to come, I want you to come feel her breath. And so I took her hand. Her hand was on her mother's chest, and I left my hands away. And then in about the next 5 seconds, I watched her take her last breath, and we were both extremely present. We were around this lady, and I didn't know much about her. And the woman, her daughter was in shock. She kind of looked at me and she said, "That was it. That was the last breath." And I said, "Yeah,
What a
yeah."
gift.
And we waited a couple more minutes, and then I just went to my phone. I played some soft music. And what people also don't understand is you don't need to do anything after after your loved one passes. The energy in the room is the most powerful you'll ever witness. Don't call the mortuary right away. Don't call the hospice nurse. I promise it'll be okay. You have up to 24 hours, really, even 48. If you really want to, you can put some kind of cold packs around the body. Rigor mortis is something that people always are spooked about, but that only starts around, between 24 and 48 hours. And all that happens is the body stiffens at first, and then it relaxes. Um, Relaxes as in it's not going to stay in that rigor mortis state per se. But the idea behind it is we're so afraid of having suddenly their body unattended to.
Hmm.
it's fine. It's really okay. So I gave them permission to just take the next couple hours to be with her. It was very sweet. Also, you can touch the body. You really can touch the face. You can kiss her cheeks. You can brush her hair. You can do anything. And it is true that some body liquid might come out, meaning that if they had been laboring and breathing, there might be some saliva. And anyway, these are not medical advice things. I'm not a nurse. I just have learned. Um, and there is some things that could exit the body even through kind of the bowels, but they have a chuck, which is a absorbent pad underneath. And then if you are kind of going more of the natural route, a death doula is called in to even do the cleaning ritual with you, where you get to clean your loved one and put them in maybe a different outfit or something. Anyway, for this particular family, they waited a little bit. I waited there with them, and then they did call, the mortuary to come pick up the body because she was getting buried. And it is very precious to see, it's usually these two strong men who cradle the body with a special, there's, it's a little bit hard to see, but they lift the body, they put the thing underneath, with loops on the side, and then they put the body back and they're able to hold it with handles, but it looks like they're being cradled. And then you get to watch them drive away. Now, I went really detailed into that.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
Just because I want to keep talking about this as just a, hey, here's what you can expect. Even if someone who is dying of natural causes, like a grandma or grandpa or something, this is still something that people don't know about. They don't know that they don't have to call anyone right away. They could sit with the spirit of it. Anyway, afterwards, I called my supervisor and I said, I am so energized. I don't know if it was adrenaline. I don't know if it was um, it was a happy death. It was like the most successful death I've ever been to because it was so harmonious. And then I said, I could run a marathon. This is the best feeling I've ever had. And she said, that's weird. She was like, that's odd. I think we found your job. I had any intern. I was a social worker intern at the time. I've never had anyone say that. And I said, oh, cool. Well,
Mhm.
and then afterwards, I think I had that energy with me for days.
Nice.
Um,
It
and
makes
then,
sense. You were talking about energy, right? I
oh
mean,
yeah,
how many generations of people were there?
right, right. And I didn't even have to know the woman, but just to be present for the death was an honor. Um, and it's one of the first. So that was one of the first deaths I witnessed. And it was, like I said before, and that was a beautiful one. There's harder deaths that I've witnessed where they looked like they were in distress. The family was in conflict. It was not ideal, but that one was really beautiful. And then the only other story that I have that is worth telling is that when I was driving around in Tucson, we got a call to go way out there. I don't even know. It was like Sarita or Sarita. I don't
Hmm.
know. It was like
Sonoida, I mean,
Sonoida, yeah, or something like that. It was on the border. I hadn't even heard of the town.
yeah.
We serve people all the way out there, and they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I went out there, and pretty much I was dealing with someone who I don't know if we call it squatting. I don't know what we were dealing with, but it was pretty much a shack, and he had no electricity or running water. I think I was given a small heads up, but he greeted me at the door with a rifle. And he was just so worried that I was there to take him away from his home.
Mm.
But all I was there to do was to see what he would need from us in terms of, hey, you know, someone in your community told us that you have a terminal illness, and we're here just to assess if you could use some pain meds and if you could use a hospital bed, and we would come and make sure you're comfortable and okay. He didn't believe me at first, and took a lot of conversation, and my heart was pounding the whole time, but he eventually he put his gun down.
That's
uh,
nice.
yeah.
Scary.
um, But, he thought we were going to just drag him to some
Mm.
nursing facility or something. And luckily, I get to say that we work really hard not to take people out of their homes, but you need help, sir. You don't have running water. I don't know how you're eating, things like that, where I was almost about to call Adult Protective Services, which, I mean, I was afraid that even they would do things to get him into a different position and therefore out of his home. So I really convinced him to say, hey, just let us come and help. And that was maybe the hardest case I had as a social worker. But I saw hoarding cases where you'd walk in and I have no idea how these people were functioning and dying in pretty abysmal situations. I did have a couple situations where I had to call Adult Protective Services because, those who are dying are one of the most vulnerable populations. Their cognition is not the same. They have family members or people who are taking advantage of them financially. They're stealing social security checks. They're doing all these pretty nasty things. And so I didn't prepare as a social worker. I know I was a boots on the ground social worker, but I didn't know how delicate this population is. And, from what I studied in grad school, we're dealing with now the baby boomer burst, where we can't even build nursing facilities and retirement communities fast enough. I mean, pretty soon, no matter what industry you're in, you are going to be serving the aging and dying population of the baby boomers. And so it's quite I mean, if you want to work in the death care industry, hop on in. It's a wave that is growing.
How would
And
someone go about doing that if they're interested in it and called to it?
yeah, well, I mean, people are so afraid that, like, well, if I'm not a nurse, if I'm not a social worker, like, how can I do this? And honestly, there are people who get into death work with such a variety of skills. Like, I have a friend who she's a copywriter and makes websites for death doulas, by the way, because she
Mm.
really loves the community. If you want help, even just launching kind of more of that service in your website, but she's a celebrant who writes obituaries and eulogies with the person. So she interviews them, and all you got to do is talk, and you talk about your loved one, and you tell stories, and she writes it into a book that's all ready to go.
Wow.
So she
Huh.
technically is a death doula too. I'm the one that I'm more interested in witnessing it. So I sit vigil. I also come and I do some emotional prep before death. So my little package includes coming several sessions while people are still verbal, and I talk about ways to navigate distress. Not like I'm telling them how to navigate their own death because it's very unique and it's very personal, but just what might help. And then I usually turn towards the family and I say, you guys also make a big difference. Let's talk about how to handle some death.
Mm.
And then I also really like helping younger people who, I mean, the minute you turn 18, you don't have essentially, like, if you were to become incapacitated, the power of attorney, meaning anyone who could speak for you and anything they want to do to you physically, if you are medically indisposed and unable to speak for yourself, that defaults to your parents or eventually a spouse. And people who are estranged from their parents are kind of shocked when they find out that that's the only person who can speak for them in life and death if they can't themselves. So there's a couple documents that I feel like they should give kids in high school. I'm just like, hey, if anything were to happen to you, by the way, let's talk about this, because you're not a minor anymore. And then if you have kids and you haven't done any end of life prep, if you have no idea where they'd be going, who you would trust to watch them, even in a long stint of chronic illness, or if you're indisposed but not dying, this approach of how do I prepare for end of life is where I get kind of in the nitty gritty. So I'm, if you really are afraid of the death doula term, I could technically call myself an end of life consultant. I'm not a lawyer. I don't do legal stuff. I just say, hey, once you describe an estate that's quite advanced, I'll say you're going to need an estate lawyer to make sure that's all wrapped up. But I don't do any of that. Um, And then,
But you know exactly what steps they need to take, and you're a great source of information for anyone that's got any questions about this.
yes, and like I do workshops where like essentially if you come and you're brave to come to a end of life prep workshop thing with me, and you can also do one-on-one. I do like virtual stuff. I give you every single document that you'll need. Now, give me a little research because depending on where you're from, it depends on the state. So I'm currently in Utah, but I also know how to do this for people in Arizona. I know every single document that someone would possibly need in Utah to be really, honestly, 100% prepared in terms of what could be put on paper. Now, 100% prepared doesn't mean emotionally,
Hmm.
and even something like a we talk about like a power of attorney or a medical attorney. You don't put like, okay, if I have this exact situation, this is what I want my family to do. You can't, but you talk about values. What was what would you be in your best time of life? And then how could that be kind of condensed, like how could I break that down to be something that would be comfortable in death? So, for example, my husband really loves the outdoors. You better know that I'm going to be asking for, if he has to be in the hospital, I'm going to ask for a window. Like little things like that. I know that I know his values. So he's talked about values. For me, if I am dying anywhere in some sort of building and they have a sports game playing, I would just haunt them. I would hate it. I don't
Me too.
sports. I wish I wish I did because they're kind of fun, but like to hear a sports game on the TV, I would hate it. So little things like that where it's like then we talk about your deathbed and how to make it kind of a celebration and what's the colors and the tastes and the smells and the do you want your cats in the room and things like that. And I really love doing that with older people who are really ready to talk about that, but I do it for anyone as young as they're willing to be brave, right? So, and then, so that's my jam. So I do end of life consulting, but I also hold space in the actual death energy. And then on top of that, I feel like I really like living funerals. Like we talk about how to celebrate you while you're here. So those are legacy projects. And then a whole other branch that I am not even, I mean, I'm educated in it, but there's a whole, I mean, if you're into this, you're into this. It's the green burial movement where death doulas come and do the, like, essentially the disposition prep. So there's in every single state, there is a green burial alliance where they want to prove to you that funerals don't have to be expensive, but that you're going to have to educate yourself, just like in a birth prep. Like, hey, there's other options here that they've done for millennia, and there's ways we can do this. So, very famously, people have heard in more of the Pacific Northwest, you have the organic reduction, or people just caught, they joke that it's, human compost.
Like a burial pod where they plant a tree over it in remembrance of their loved one.
And even cooler, so what they have now, which this is only in a couple states, is that they put the body on a natural soil, and then it's a special kind of rapid reduction where it's turned, just like if you have kind of like a compost at home, it's better when you turn it, and the body is turned just for several weeks. Like they've got it down to just, what otherwise would have taken years for a body to naturally decompose 6 feet under the ground. Um, they put some, active, I don't know what to call them, just organisms that break the body down very naturally but quickly. And then at the end, the body really is the same as the soil and compost that was in that pod that turns the body. And you can come and visit and watch the process. And it kind of boggles the mind, but the funeral, the end of it is where each family member takes a bag of this organic compost. and gets to put it, on the trees in their home and things like that, in their backyard and stuff. So that's not legal here in Utah. The greenest thing we have is there's a couple places that will let you be buried in the ground, not in a established lacquer coffin. And then also they make sure that you're not also embalmed, because embalming does include some pretty harsh chemicals, and that's why they do protect you from the earth, but that means the earth can't touch your body
Mm-hmm.
and you're not going back into the earth. So they have a couple funeral homes here where you can be buried, and people get so afraid of embalming or to not be embalmed. I like to tell the story that the only reason embalming came about was in the Civil War, when they found out that if they, pardon my language, but if they essentially turn you halfway into soap, um, you could be shipped on a train back home so that your family gets your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That the
yeah.
heat didn't touch it. You're pretty much pristine. But when people say, "Well, I saw grandma. She was in the open casket and embalmed," and that wasn't my grandma.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, so the funeral industry is fantastic. I want to work with them, not against them. Think about traumatic death, where it's either a shot, a gun wound victim, or someone who dies in a car crash, and they can reconstruct the sides of a face. They can do all these incredible things. I just don't think that's needed for every single death process. And so you really can have a loved one frozen. Um, I mean, you no other word for it, you're frozen. Um, and then you can still have an open casket, and they make them look very presentable without cremating. No, sorry, without embalming.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't get embalmed. I don't think when you're cremated. I have to do some research on that.
Mm.
So only because they're working with pretty weird chemicals, and I don't know if that's conducive to cremation. So
Which, when someone's embalmed too, are there toxins and poisons that if they were just put into the earth embalmed would damage the earth?
more like the groundwater. It's
Oh,
just harsh on the groundwater. So that's why certain, I I didn't know this, but a person who cares for a grave site is called a sexton. I learned that a couple months ago. Um, but a sexton has to make sure that there's, essentially no crossover between those chemicals in the groundwater, that we're, we don't know where it runs. It's kind of a delicate process. So, I mean, that's why they're kind of locked in their caskets, and and when you're embalmed, you're kind of pristine in there anyway. So there's just, everyone is getting back to the organic reduction of just like, either put yourself in the earth. You're supposed to give back to the earth with your
mm-hmm.
body,
Yeah,
with that ideology. Um, or, essentially, and what we can do here in Utah is, and if this is some, like, a lot of my clients, they want this. So even though I'm not an expert at this, there's people who are going up to the Utah Capitol and lobbying for this, of getting more and more green burial options, but it's a hard culture to advocate for that.
sure. Yeah.
I don't know why, but here we are.
It's
So
been the same now for over 100 years, right? And it's just the accepted norm. It's hard to change that.
and like, think about how funeral homes are an industry. It's a
How much is
business.
a funeral? Around 25 grand or so?
25 grand. It depends if you want a really in-depth gravestone. I mean, we're going up to 30,000, or sorry, 30, yeah, 30,000.
Wow.
Um, and you can go higher. You can go up to 100,000 if you want the
Yeah,
nice
sure.
casket. And I mean, the nightmare stereotype is that funeral industry worker that says, like, well, wouldn't you want to put grandpa on something really nice? And then it's like, yeah, get the nicest casket. And I mean, that's what, 10,000 on its own. Like, it's just crazy. So the Green Burial, or like Home Funeral Alliance, depending on what state you're in, it has a different name. They even have an on-call person. If you're going to a funeral home, you can call them and say, hey, which part of this package they gave me is bogus? Go line through line, and they're going to educate you. Like, you don't have to pay for that. or like transportation is something that you can do on your own. Like if you have to, they'll charge a couple $100 to transport the body. They say, no, you're legally allowed to move the body yourself. They really get in there. They say, we got to make this something that people of every financial status can do. Like, why is death why is it the main thing we do on GoFundMe?
Hmm.
Like, this is crazy. You can die for free. But it's the industry that wants you to die for money. Like you just have money to give for this process. But people are just so afraid of not respecting their loved ones.
And they're also torn emotionally, I would imagine, and in a very vulnerable position and could be easily taken advantage of. And I'm sure that happens.
So let's just say I couldn't quite work for a funeral home, even though they're now hiring licensed grief therapists, which is pretty baller. But it's just like, okay, I'm not quite sure unless I find a funeral home that is open to green burial,
Hmm.
that I can really feel good about offering all the services. I'm not into that. So right now it's a side hustle of me just explaining the options. And my death doula client that I just recently had, they did the whole kit and caboodle with the funeral home. The other client that I had just wanted the cheapest cremation she could find. I was working with, like I said, I mean, there were hoarder homes. There were people who were getting their social security checks taken by their weird son, and they had no money. So as a social worker, I had to figure out how to help explain to them that as the social worker, I had to prepare them for their disposition,
Wow.
which no
Mm.
one wanted to talk about, by the way.
Yeah.
So I'm like, we have to figure out what we're going to do with your body. And it's just, man, people get really spooked when I say that. Um, so the only other cool thing you can do here in Utah, besides getting buried in like a wood box, and they'll actually put you in the earth, there's a handful of places that'll do that here, is they have now barely what's called aquamation, where they have a solution that breaks down the soft tissue of your body and it turns it into something you can put into the groundwater, and it doesn't hurt the earth. But then what's left is the bones, and only those are cremated because cremation does still cause a lot of carbon dioxide slash like CO2 disruption. It's not the best for the earth. Even cremation, which people thought for the longest time that was the green alternative.
Hmm.
Well, at least it decreases what would be cremated. It's just your bones, but then the other half of you is given back to the earth in form of a liquid.
Hmm.
Um, so that's aquamation, which people don't know existed. And there's like just a couple locations. So when I talk about my disposition with my husband, he's used to it. He's married to a death doula. And I'll say, I'll be petting my dog and I'm like, man, I'm going to miss you when you die. And then I'll hug my husband and I say, man, I wish you don't die too soon and you're going to die and I'm going to miss you. And he's like, on a Tuesday, like, can we not? It's like the fourth time this week. And
What
I'm
an
like,
adventure for him.
yeah, I just have to handle it. And so we've had discussions of what I'd want. And I know he'd want like beautiful cedar box, natural wood to be buried in. He knows that if it's possible, I'd like some aquamation, but it's a little bit of a far drive. So I said, it's okay if I also have to be buried in a box because you're the one that has to deal with this. And then
Hmm.
we have a certain document where you write down your disposition needs, and it's something you can get signed by a notary, and that it's your words. I want to be, I want my body to have this. And then, believe it or not, death doula work is advocacy work. So the people who are advocating for more green burials, they do this. And now I could even give you some weird examples of where suddenly you're an advocate for things you didn't think you would be. So, for example, if you grew up a certain gender and you decided to change it, who gets to be the one to dress you in your most comfortable gender oriented clothing and do your makeup the way that you would have wanted? And people who are especially in the queer community or those who aren't quite comfortable with the demands of their family and what they'd want,
Hmm.
uh, there's even certain clothing within the religion I grew up in that they want to be buried in, but that doesn't align with me. So I have to even write down, please don't put me in certain clothing. I would like this to be put on me. And I have a picture of it. And this is how I would do my makeup. This is usually my favorite dress to wear, things like that. It's the weirdest party you'll ever plan for. So, and I'm pregnant. I'm about like 36 weeks. No, 35 weeks. So
That's exciting.
yeah, so I'm preparing to have a child at some point, and I just can already imagine that if I am going to be responsible for this child, the least I could do is prepare for, any event of me not being there to support them. And so that's usually the client I get. Either they're terminally ill
Mm.
or they just want to help their family.
Awesome. Well, I have to say, my wife and I have been discussing these things for a few years now, and I would definitely want to use you as a resource later on, hopefully
Yeah,
within the next month, right? And be able to work with you. We're here in Arizona, and you said that you have the paperwork and the forms, and we do want to get that done and prepaid so that
yeah.
there's no worries afterwards. We don't want to be a burden. I don't think anybody really does, so
And
such a
and
great resource.
no one is just supposed to know. Like, just get someone who, there's a lot more death doulas than you think. There's actually a website called National End of Life Doula Association. So it's NEDA, NEDA, and they have a vast directory of end of life professionals who have done exams
Mm,
to be called end of life proficient. So it's not a certification. It's not something I can say I'm licensed as a death doula. There's no licensure. This is the wild west of this sort of role, even though it's existed since time immemorial. Like, there's always been someone in the community to work with death,
mhm.
but now we have to find some fancy label and not be told that we're weird.
Yeah, yeah. That's going to grow exponentially. I can imagine from what you were saying with the baby boomers and everything, that this is a great thing.
And Alua Arthur, the woman that trained me, I mean, she's been on Oprah. She was actually, if you have Disney Plus, there's that, oh, who's that Australian guy that plays Thor? Chris Hemsworth. Chris
Yep,
Hemsworth
yep.
did a show where he did all these kind of bigger experiments to test his human strength or something, and he actually did a whole episode with Alua Arthur where he had to confront death.
Really. I want to
Um,
watch that.
yeah, so you can even, look, I can't remember what it's called.
That'll be easy to
But
find, I'm sure. Yeah.
oh yeah, so it's becoming a thing, uh, more than it was even 10 years ago. I think COVID did it. I
Hmm.
think COVID really blew the ceiling off of, like, we're talking about death more, whether you like it or not.
Yep.
Um, and then, for you to invest in your own end of life work, and your wife to invest as well, even just in time, um, because it will take some work. You just feel a million times lighter. Like, I tell a little story, and my husband doesn't know that I took this so seriously, but we got our living will situated, and he described that he had more fun on his mountain biking ride. He could go a little harder, he could try a jump a little bigger, because he just had taken care of what fear wanted to make him, I guess, paralyzed with. But we
Hmm.
look at his face and we say, bring it on.
So
The
I'd
worst.
imagine this work would bring about a sense of peace and calm within one that does it and has everything, all their ducks in a row, all organized.
Yeah, I mean, in my workshops, you are going to hear way more laughter than solemnness.
Hmm.
It's
Describe one of your workshops, if you will. What is entailed within one of those?
Well, I make it a little witchy just for fun, because usually the people who want to sit with death are in that community. So it usually involves food. We have drinks. You sit down. I first address the idea that death and grief have always been a part of our lives. They've been constant companions, and they're just here to help. And that I use a metaphor of, if you woke up on your like 501st birthday, you think you'd be a little tired.
Hmm.
Think you'd maybe wonder what else there was to experience. And we sit with that of saying death is what makes us have this zest or urgency to live. And it also, you know helps us acknowledge that there is no correct time to die, because we love to say that so and so lived a long and healthy life, but then what about that 8-year old? that lived to the max of his life, and who are we to say that he didn't live a full and happy life, right? So death is no respecter of persons. Um, Even though I will very much argue that not all death is equal, we do all die, right? So there could be ideal death that could be facilitated a little easier with money, with support, with, you know, things like a harmonious family. If you're from kind of a broken home, death is going to be a different situation, as well as if you're in poverty or something like that. But the rich, the poor, the mean, the kind, they all die. Um, and with that, I do rest in this sort of mystery of, we're not here to explain why a death happened. A lot of spiritual people try to find meaning in it, and you're allowed to. I just don't think it's something that we have to put on other people. I really resist, or teach people to resist, platitudes, anything that let grief kind of become numbed. It's often from a religious vernacular where people say things like, well, aren't you just so happy that they're with Jesus now? And it's like, cool, but also, can they be here with me? Like,
Mhm.
I don't know what that means. Am I supposed to smile and give a thumbs up with that, or what? Like, it just is a little bit hard when people can't sit with grief or death. So we do that first. We just explore it. I always ask people how grief has followed them. It could be the first time they had to move out of their childhood home, the first time they lost a best friend, the first time they witnessed their parents getting divorced and their life changed. And then, if people really can't get deep into it, I say that death has always been a part of us, even in our transitions. So I mentioned I'm pregnant. The sweet baby that I don't know the gender of, I'm finding it out as a surprise, but the baby that I will have, they have only known one existence. It was warm, dark, and the beautiful little sound machine of my digestive system usually lulled it to sleep, right? Then I am going to have to squeeze the shit out of this thing, birth it, and according to that baby, it could have just died.
Mhm.
It moved into one reality into the next.
No wonder
And
they cry so much when they are born, you know.
yeah, so
Ow.
it's just like we also get this mystery of what is death if not a transition into something different.
Mhm.
And then I leave it up to everyone to have this beautiful creative process of what that could be.
Almost like the death of this physical body could be a rebirth of some kind.
Yes. And just, and I don't tell people from a dogmatic place what that could look like. I just say, can we please at least have a respect that we maybe have died and found a new reality before, that even in you being born, it might have felt like a death, but it was something that you then were able to explore as in a new reality. Use awe and wonder, and like, let the mystery be. Just just let death be the ultimate mystery, because we all get to share it. And it's something that people can, they can tell me all they want about death, especially with near death experiences. A lot of people tell me, well, we do know what happens. And it's like, okay, cool, but I like my mystery. I like the fact that no one can really tell me, and that gives me a certain strength and a certain power, like that I just, everything else has to be rigorously tested. Everything else has to be scientifically navigated. Even in the medical field, they've tried to even study death. But at the end of the day, it is the ultimate mystery. And so we're okay with that as kids. We're like, wow, it's just amazing, and we don't understand it. And then we get really, really angry about something like that as an adult, that we don't understand it. So I go back to a childish or childlike place with them. We usually have a sound bath, maybe at the end. But then I introduce every document. That could be the post form, which is just a one page, comfort measures
Mm.
that you'd have to give to a nurse and say, hey, we wouldn't actually like for artificial hydration and nutrition. We just want to make sure they're not in pain. So could you please just give them pain meds? And if they have these other situations going on, can we use lotion and oils to make sure that their neuropathy is taken care of, things like
Mm.
that. Then you have the power of attorney, which is according to your state. Depending on your state, they also have a medical, sorry. So that's the medical power of attorney. So who's going to speak for you in medical cases? Sometimes that's coupled with the financial power of attorney. So who's going to be taking care of your assets? And that could be something that you fill out. Depending on where you are, it needs to be notarized for it to be legally binding.
Mhm.
And then we have the form of disposition, where you say, as far as I know, this is what I'd like to have done with my body. That could also definitely be notarized just to be safe. I have other things of, hey, if your financial situation looks like this, here's a flow chart to make sure that at this point you need to go to the bank and do what's called a payable upon death recipient. So anything that isn't either a joint account or payable upon death, structured, everything goes to probate. I mean,
Mm.
probate processes take 1 to 2 years. If there's a big chunk in grandma's checking account, but there's no payable upon death, there's no joint, user on that account, it sits there until all the legal processes, which is according to the government, get finished, which it's snail pace.
Yeah,
So
that is good
that
to
could be
know.
used that could have been used to help the funeral, but and then don't even get me started on the technological fingerprint that is exploding with every life. Like, what are you going to do with their social medias? Do you know their like ultimate Google password, the password to get into the
Mm.
password storing system? Like, do you know these things? Because if you can't even get into their computer because you don't know that 4-digit code that gets into their laptop, oh, good luck. Like,
Okay, so that's something that could be a part of the paperwork, like a printed out master password username list for anyone who may need it.
yeah, I even have the only exercise I do, because I have people do most of this just in their homework. We don't have time to get it all done unless I were to do quite the cool, maybe multi-day workshop. That'd be a good
Mhm.
idea. But I have people immediately get on their phones and I show them how to do what's called a legacy contact on your iPhone.
Mm.
There's also the same thing on Android, and I have a page to teach people how to do that. But on your iPhone, you can go and set up a legacy contact that there's 1 to 2 people who can access everything in your phone
Mm.
when you're on. Um, and that's, I mean, if you can give a couple of those things to your loved ones, that they don't have to hack into the system just to change a password to your account. And I mean, you need several copies of the death certificate. You need to be calling the Social Security office, credit card companies.
Mhm.
Also, we do this quick after someone is gone, and that's something I can help facilitate as a death doula. That there are messed up people out there who it would be like the online version of ambulance chasers, that they find who just passed and they use their identity. So they steal that person's identity before someone has time to cancel credit cards and social security
Mm.
identities. And it's pretty nasty.
I'm
So
so glad that we're doing this and getting this information out there. I haven't heard of hardly any of this, and I never thought of it before, you know? Who has? Nobody.
no one wants to talk about like
The
I have a
important things. Yeah.
important things, and then also the nasty side of death. I
Hmm.
love to talk about the ritual side and how to make
Mm.
it ideal, and what I like to call a good enough death. No, people can argue that there's no good about death. Fair. It's not pretty and you're losing a loved one, but could there be a good enough or ideal death where someone is held, held in their death, and then everything was taken care of on the outskirts? And there's a quote, I forget who said it, but it's something like, do everything you can so that the only thing left to do is die. So that you're not thinking about your kids and what financial situation you're putting them in. You're not writhing in agony just thinking about what unfinished business you have and even words unsaid. You just
Mm.
get to die. And a lot of people, they misunderstand that at the end of life, you do most likely just ease into an unconscious state, which isn't exactly like sleep, it's deeper. People sometimes they wake up and express almost like spiritual work, like they had been working hard doing something. We don't know what, um, but their mind is very active in a very serious way. So we let them do it, right? But if they can't do that because they're distressing over unfinished business, that's what I want to prevent, because it's unnecessary pain that, had they just been given a window to talk about this, society won't do it for you. They, that if you prepare for life, great. Like, everyone wants to talk about that. What stocks are you going to invest in? What do you blah blah blah? No one talks about preparing for death. And think about who doesn't make money if you prepare for death, because they can't scare you. I mean, even as a woman, you could scare me into spending thousands of dollars on Botox and anti-aging creams, and you could even scare me into lots of even weird procedures to make me even cheat the image of death. But if I sit with death, you have no power over me. So no one wants us to do this.
I
Like,
love that.
it's in a capitalist society that likes to make money off people. And
Not to
so
be a
that's my
capitalist right now, but is there any book that you've published or anything that you could amass all this information and maybe get it published so that I could link it to you and just, you could make some money on the side, whatever. But this
yeah.
is such important information. If I had a book to buy that would teach me all these things and
Mhm.
step by step walk me through what I need to do to
Yeah.
fully let go of everything and just be at peace and be prepared, I would
Mhm.
I would pay for that.
Well, you're giving me some amazing career projects to work on. I don't have anything published at the moment. I have essentially just this little packet that I've created with printouts.
Okay.
But that's the basis of what I've been able to do in the few short years that I've been doing this.
Excellent. No, I've published some books myself, and I would be more than happy and willing to help you in any way that I could.
Cool. That'd be awesome.
I would
There,
love that.
I mean, there's other people who have done this to the best of their ability, and it's kind of like I mean, you can even find it on Amazon. It's like, one of them is called "Shoot, I'm Dead. Now What?"
Hmm.
And it has this whole book of things you filled out, where you get to put those, couple key passwords that would give people access to the log of your passwords. It was, it has your preferences of, hey, here's where I want my favorite cowboy boots to go to, and my wedding ring, I'd like to give it to so and so. And I mean, it's a slow journal that you'd have to keep, but that's essentially what is mostly on the market here. I don't think they go into the emotional and the spiritual prep, where that could be as deep as meditations. It could be as, um, I don't know, huge as like a big living funeral celebration, to help you feel closure. They also talk about the four unsaid words of I love you, I forgive you, I'm sorry. Wait, that's so funny. I forgot the last one.
It's okay.
Um,
It'll come.
anyway, but there's these sayings that people are, it's proven to decrease distress if they're able to say it to their loved ones. Um,
What
but
about plant
anyway,
medicine too? A lot of people are now, instead of pain meds, they want to try plant medicines for maybe the first time and
oh my
really,
gosh,
you know.
there's so much research now on psilocybin, of not even just like marijuana for, excuse me, for pain relief, but
Mhm.
for like mushrooms' ability to eradicate a fear of death. Like, it just goes away,
Yeah.
which is pretty wild. This was mostly done by, I think it was Gaber Mate.
Mm.
He did a lot of research on this.
I love him. He is so compassionate.
Yeah, so he was talking about that a little bit just recently. And so I mean, like, the death industry is, I mean, it could be a business or it could be a spiritual practice. Like, it's how you navigate it often aligns with how you lived. So people who are pursuing a death doula, they usually had been pursuing alternative medicines. They had been doing little things that just kind of took them out of the conveyor belt of the medical system per se. And we want to work with the medical system. We want to make sure that everything is taken care of as much as possible, but
Mm.
then it's okay that your doctor only had 5 minutes to talk about your end of life measures. That's why doulas exist. And also, as a social worker, I was a great hospice social worker, but even I only had 30 minutes with every client. I
Yeah,
had so much.
that's just not enough, is it?
Oh yeah, I had so much paperwork just to keep them on hospice that was most of the work that I did, was making sure that they could stay on hospice. I wasn't,
Mm.
sitting there, holding their hands, listening to their stories as long as I could. So that's why, as a doula, we're non-medical professionals, who meaning we don't touch the bodies, we don't give professional advice in terms of what to do with their medical state. But we are just social, emotional, even spiritual supports for the dying and their loved ones. And that is the type of person that you can hire to navigate something like this. And we work even with hospice social workers. So, like, I have a deep respect because I was one, but people are like, well, then what would a hospice social worker do? I'm like, a lot,
Hmm.
a lot.
More than
So,
you know.
yeah. So, so it's just that I mean, like, the people who can, they try to hire a birth doula. The people who can try to hire a death doula. We're just there to help it go better. So if you have someone in your life who's if you're overwhelmed as a caregiver, we're here to help. And there's just no one has really heard of this role, but they don't know that we're here to ease the burden of something that we all have to go through. No one gets out of this life alive.
I love
So
that.
yeah.
And you sparked something in me. I'd never thought of this before, but the entire thing that I aspire to do is inspire people as sort of a life doula with good in the head, right? We got a
Mm-hmm.
birth doula, we got
Mm-hmm.
a death doula now, but what about all those years in between? What about some tools and tips and tricks to optimize every aspect of the human experience, and live life fully?
Yeah, right. And that's the cool part, is if you sit with death, your life force increases. You don't grow morbid, you grow grateful. Like, the more that I sit with and witness death, the more I don't take for granted everything I have in my life.
Hmm.
And I'm going to be bold. And so people who do big, amazing things, I often just wonder if they had sat with their legacy, kind of like I do a meditation, where if you're on a rocking chair on a porch and you're in your 80s, what were you proud of doing? What were the things you were so happy you stopped at a young age? What were you happy about that book you published, or were you just happy that you made sure your kids and your grandkids felt safe around you? Like, what did you do that you really wanted to? And then, believe it or not, using the lens of even old age will usually give us the snap into like what we want for our lives. And it's just a dose of death. It's a dose of grief that, like, do it. Do more of what you think would make you die. What's the word? It's just like we want to be so we want to die tired, right? Like, having lived such a big life, um not physically maybe, but we've done everything we set out to do. And then I see death in a lot of different ways as a therapist, because I receive the unfortunate cases of death. And so, with that, there's a lot of people like, this is all lovely and great, but a lot of death in my life has been traumatic. And even those traumatic deaths, there can be a little bit of, even like, if the death has already happened and you hire a death doula to support the grief process. They did a study, really hard to study grief, by the way, because it's so unique. It's like a fingerprint.
Right.
Um, they found that on average, without putting a timetable to it, ironically, people started reporting, even in non-traumatic grief cases, that it took 4 years to feel regulated in their new reality.
It's interesting you say that. I just listened to a podcast this last week by Dr. Tara Swart, and it was on the Diary of a CEO podcast. And it's been 4 years, and she's just now sharing that her husband died of leukemia, and
Mm.
it was phenomenal.
Yeah. So,
She was
like,
so honest. I was blown away. It was so inspiring.
yeah, and it's something that, like, okay, then why in the world do we essentially not really allow grief to live that long inside of us? We think we shame ourselves for not getting back to work and back to our happy selves after even just a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as a grief therapist, I try to dispel this notion that society tells us the length to grieve, our bodies do.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you are a completely different person because of the effect of grief, but it's a transformative sort of transformation by fire sort of process that makes us so human and so real and so deeply empathetic. And that's why I like working with grievers. They are the most unmasked. Um, it's almost like they're stripped down to the studs of who they are. And I'm not saying that's only pretty. I'm saying I find some pretty ugly stuff when we can't keep pretending through little niceties of life who we are. Grief strips you of anything unreal. And then a lot of people, they don't know that they should go to therapy for grief. And there's a lot that we do. So even on my clinical side, I'm going to advocate that if you have a therapist in your area who specializes in grief, don't sleep on that, because grief is not going to be championed in our culture. Again, who makes money off of it?
Yeah. Melody Beattie came out with a book called The Grief Club.
Mhm.
I just bought it, and the on social media it's called The Grief Club. You can find it almost anywhere. It's almost like a huge, massive support group for grievers.
Yeah.
And I mean, any loss results in grief. The loss of a marriage, divorced parents, a loss of a friend, not even to death. So many causes for grief. And like you said, it's just like a fingerprint. And
Yeah.
before we go deeper into grief, I wanted to address something that I heard you say about, you know, death and dying is literally something, maybe the only thing you'll ever do specifically and literally just for you.
Hmm.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. It's kind of the idea of like when you get married, it's with your husband. When you have a baby, it's halfway about the baby. Death, it's something that only you can experience fully. And isn't it ironic that that's the last thing we want to plan? It kind of goes, in my mind, to this fear of self development, self exploration. We're so afraid to be called selfish when we do anything just for ourselves. And so,
Hmm.
especially for women who have sacrificed to have big families and serve them, um, or the idea that we're just essentially supposed to live for other people, even for a God, that the idea of thinking exactly what you'd want to be comfortable for your death process, people shy away from it in the same way they shy away from self-care. And so it's a radical act of self-love to do your own death work. And when people start going into it, they're timid. And then when I get people talking, they're like, okay, awesome. I have this like bedazzled pantsuit thing that I was known for. Even if I can't wear that as an old lady, I want that like near the casket. Or I want purple everywhere. I want these flowers. I want someone to be baking bread so I can smell the fresh bread smell in the kitchen. And it's just like, awesome. What else? Just like how can we make sure that it's like a it's the pure perfect curation of who you are. And that's a good funeral and a good end of life kind of cultivation, is if someone goes to your funeral and you're like, man, that was them. Like that was totally them. And so I kind of joke that if my funeral is in a cultural hall in a church building, I'm gonna be a little bugged. Um, I'd want mine maybe with a little bit of access to nature. I want a little fun. I want some dancing. I have a lot of ideas. But if it goes past the norm, I better get it in writing,
Hmm. Yeah.
because when people are grieving, they're essentially their prefrontal cortex is not even on. They're not thinking. So I want that all communicated before I'm ill. And that's been a fun thing to do, because people get weirded out that I'm only 29 and I'm like, hey, for my funeral, can everyone wear purple and bring their dogs on leashes? And I don't know. That's an example. I don't even know. But like I want a barbecue. I want to, I want everyone to bring their favorite anecdote of me that made them laugh. And then I want uh, I want some rap music playing at some point, maybe some dochi, maybe go into some like early 2000s music, maybe play some like Green Day. I know, I'm just like, why not?
And why not make it about you? This is your funeral. And most people, when they plan a funeral or go through with all these steps, they're doing it for them. And everyone always says, the funeral is for the grieving. But
Yes.
if it's fun, if it's a party, if it's a celebration of life, how more useful would that be for everyone in their healing process?
Well, and how better could people grieve if they feel their loved one there? Whereas, like, if you
Oh
put me
yeah.
in a stuffy kind of like churchy funeral, and they're like, what hymn would she want? I'm like, even I don't know that. Like, good luck with that. Um, or it's like, I mean, but what's cool is I would want to mix to represent who I was, right? So I still might have someone pray at the beginning of the funeral. I still might have a hymn that I want sung, and then everyone's going to hear some rap music while they dance. Like, I don't know. And this is just, I'm giving silly examples, but really, my husband already knows the basics of I want it outdoors. I love purple. I love animals. I like all these things. And then I feel like when people do this, they have a lot of fun, and then they don't realize that they had done an act, like a radical act of self-love. And they just took an absolute like boulder off the shoulders of their loved ones.
That's massive.
Because yeah, and so um yeah, I don't know how much time we have left, but essentially what I like to go into with grief is the idea that if you honor that um grief is something that has to be respected as its own teacher. So, grief, I like to say, is a kind but firm professor, that it's going to teach you what it needs to teach you. And if you get in its way, that's what creates the pathology of complex grief.
Hmm.
And then society could get in the way, trauma could get in the way, things like that. Essentially, from like my therapist hat, the only symptom of grief that would be considered unnatural or unsafe is if we've had a couple, you know, I've personally had a couple instances where people are so lost in grief that they start imagining ways to be with their loved ones. So it does turn into suicidal ideation.
Hmm.
At that point, please seek mental health services, just to make sure that it's held in a very sensitive container. But other than that, people don't know that you should be somatically not okay. You should either be eating way more than you usually do or not want to eat at all. Your sleep should be absolutely haywire, because your spirit, mental, and physical state are all the same. So your body aches and pains are just as much grief as your tears. Nothing is wrong with you. You should have a lot of brain fog. You should have low patience. You should not be able to respond very well to the people reaching out to say the stupid phrase of like, what, anything you need. If you have two brain cells that could be put together and it could give you an idea of what someone might need, just do it. Do it for them, and trust that as an adult, they can say no, thank you once you do. Because if you put the burden on telling you what they need and they don't even know, they will not respond, and it will not be a grief support. So just do things I mean, it's even a good creative practice to understand, well, what would I need? Well, I don't know if I would ever take my dogs on a walk. I'm going through that, so I'm going to just come by and offer to take them on a walk. I'm sure, like food and meals, but also think about the idea that they want to be shown that they're still kind of the same person inside, and that they need someone to express that to. So, yes, do something fun, but the occasional visit to a lunch spot or a coffee spot gives them that little dose of normalcy. And so I often say that it's a train. Everyone gets on the train for the funeral. They get off on the first stop and then they're alone on that train.
Yeah,
And it keeps
yeah.
going. No one gets back on the train after the funeral. And so if we hold space for our grieving friends and family and neighbors, things like that, it really does show a lot. Do little things like writing down the death anniversary of their loved ones and call or text. Um, Even as a therapist, I write down their dates and we prepare for death dates and things like that. So grief is a softening. Every time I work with grievers, I'm soft even in myself that day. Um, but then if there is anger and there's irritability, they're coping in their brains with something that should never have happened. And so there is this natural anger towards the world that is okay. Now, they can't be total assholes in their
Hmm.
behavior. They're still responsible for their actions. But if your friend is like, they're not the same, like they're different and they have more negativity, it's like, ooh, hold on. They learned the worst case scenario was possible and their brain fights that like hell. And so just be soft with them. And then really avoid platitudes, like I said, things like they're in a better place or, it could have been worse, things like that. There's no platitude that passes the test for me unless they use it first. So if you're around a griever or someone who is even
Mm-hmm.
facing illness, don't try to lift it out of them. Don't try to make it better because that is actually dismissive of what they're going through. Just say this absolutely sucks. How are you feeling? And they say, I don't know how I'm feeling. And I say, I wouldn't either. Just you mirror, you validate. And if they don't want to say anything, silence is not going to kill you or them. Just be quiet with them and just say, it's just so good to be here with you. I just say that over and over. It's just so good to be here. I'm just so happy I get to talk with you. And they're not saying much, and that's fine. But like you don't need to fill the silence with something that would help them fix their problems. That's actually they won't want to be around you again because they're a problem to be fixed, which is really disheartening. And then if you do say anything, I do think that it's really healthy. Not necessarily to say that you can't imagine what they're going through, but that you really are in awe of of essentially how they're navigating this. Not that they're strong and that that they have to be strong, but just say I'm in awe of what you're going through, and I can't wait to kind of talk to you more about this. And they just want to talk about their loved one. Just say, what do you miss most? What was the thing that you woke up in the morning and you wanted to do with them most? And so talking about their person, oh, they'll brighten up like crazy. So just little tips like that. You'll be a safer place for grievers. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only real note for anyone who's like, well, how do I support people who are
Mm-hmm.
grievers? And there's like, just be human, man. Like, don't be weird.
Yeah, yeah, we need that. I really love the two lists that you just created. The first one was of not only self-acceptance, but acceptance of others. It's okay to go through all of those symptoms and feel those things and have those attributes. It's not going to last forever. Just keep hanging in there, keep going, and know that you're normal. And it's okay to grieve. It's okay to have those feelings, to be angry. I mean, there's so many steps to grief. But the list of what to say, how to have conversations with people that just went through something completely devastating, that's huge. I just had a really good friend at work that lost his wife, and I didn't really know what to say, you know.
No one teaches us. It's okay.
Yeah, and love the guy. I just didn't know what to say. Other people did, and I was in awe of how he's so beautifully navigated the whole thing, and it's going to be going on for years. I know that. I mean,
Mm.
that's a big deal to lose a spouse that you love so much.
Well, the gift of you seeing the longevity to grief is something that people forget about. So they often, oh, what do I say the first time I see them? What about 2 months in?
Yeah, we get 3 days,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's most companies. 3 days is not cutting it for
Yeah.
anything at any level.
No.
Life goes on, and we've got to navigate that sometimes with massive amounts of grief. Something you said about grief was it's like a scab that gets better when you pick at it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Grief really likes action. It likes movement. It likes care. And I mean, it's it's almost like, well, okay, if you are suffering from pretty rough OCD, then we don't feed into it, for example. But grief is something where if we can oscillate from kind of the daily life, but then we can go into that grief space in and out, and we go in as often as we can through I and when I help grievers, that we come up with little minor rituals to help the grief become not so hard to get to, like um, every day on the drive home from work, when you're alone in your car, that's when you speak to your loved one, so that it's a daily practice. We have like a once a month ritual where we go to a sacred place, and it has to follow a certain order where the brain can kind of invite grief in. Lots of things like that. Um, Grief likes to be explored. Um, and so, if not, I often describe that you're going to have successfully ignored it until it kicks the door down. And
Hmm.
then we often joke that there's a tear quota, that if you don't pay attention to it, those tears are counted and will have to come at some point. Um, Meaning, and is it real? I don't know. But it's just, I've had a experience of, seeing even a hospice patient. He would just cry, cry, cry these hot tears, and we would ask him what was wrong. And he would pretty much say, just, I've had so much loss in my life. And essentially, he was dying, but then he was also thinking of the fact that he never really grieved his son dying. And so I mean, the tear quota caught up. Like,
Hmm.
you have a certain amount of tears that you just have to cry. And also, crying is really interesting. It releases certain proteins, certain supports to your immune system. It's a magic thing to do, to let yourself cry. And so,
That's so good to emphasize crying. You know, there was a quote that came back from centuries ago, and it goes something like, grief that is not expressed in the form of tears will cause other organs in the body to weep. Like
mm-hmm,
repressed grief, repressed rage, repressed feelings of any kind can literally manifest as physical symptoms, extreme pains, aches.
yeah,
It really messes with the body. There's a definite mind-body connection. According to the work of Johnny Sarno, it's
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
It's
Not to mention generational grief that
that
we
gets
can.
passed down. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and if when we heal our grief in this life,
mhm,
I've heard, I just read an article 2 days ago about quantum physics and how what we do now literally alters the past. And I don't understand that
mhm,
at
yeah.
all, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. But I also think that it's allowed, so even me doing what I do, it's allowed my family members to have different conversations. My mom is talking differently about losing her sister than
Mm,
I've ever heard her talk. Like she mentioned that, oh, I wonder, if their inability to kind of sit with that death impacted me. Um, things like that. And I was like, yeah, good question. Like people who didn't receive care for their grief outside of a sort of religious vernacular of like, well, have faith, they're fine. And you're
mhm.
like, why do I feel like absolute shit?
That's not
You know,
helpful. Yeah.
yeah, and it could be, right? It's just if it helps you, that's wonderful. But that's the case for every individual person to find how and what cocktail of support they need for their grief. And the world, they try to tell you what's normal. Normal setting is a setting on a washing machine.
Hmm.
I don't know what that is. And it's in terms of my life, I haven't had a lot of traumatic loss, which is ironic. people want to ask me what happened to me
Hmm.
for become to be a death doula and a grief therapist. And essentially, I say it's actually not weird once you think about it that a I am a studier of a thing, if you really want to call it a mental illness that every single person will suffer from. Like, let's talk about the fact that that's something mentally that we're all going to have to face. And I'm the weird one for wanting to really prepare for it if everyone's going to go through it. So, it's just like, whoa, wow, that must be a hard job. And it's like, no, that's the best job ever. I get to listen to people's anecdotes and stories about how they navigated grief. And I say, wow, now I have goals about, how I'd like to feel my grief, and it'll be a wild animal. And I'm probably going to go kicking and screaming no matter how much prep I do with death and with grief. But I tried to understand the role of grief, because it's a transformative power. So yeah.
It is, and I'm one of the weird ones that will say it sounds weird or off, but it's true. I really love funerals because of the interconnectedness you feel, not just with the energy and the power within the room, but I imagine generations of people or souls or energies there with us at the same time. You can feel it. You can
Yeah.
literally feel it. It's so powerful. And the stories like you're talking about that they all give, it's usually always positive. All the best moments of life. It truly isn't a funeral, it's a life celebration. And I love attending them because of that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think if I could end with like I don't know, mic drop line, it's just like, if I could be dramatic, I want to heal the world, not through the avoidance of pain, especially of death, but in like the embrace of death and grief. And the more ironic, the weirder I am, because that's what we, run from at high speeds to not experience is death. But if you just pause and turn around and see that it was a companion to show you what's important to you in life, then you can finally find a sort of peace in the life that is this big mystery, and we don't know how much time we have. And it makes people kinder. It makes people more bold to start businesses and write books and travel. I just think, weirdly enough, it's the medicine uh, for people. And I have to go quite into a ethereal place to try to explain that. But the people who get it. So
Agreed. That's beautiful. I love that.
yeah.
Now, I would be remiss if we didn't address the topic of consciousness, right?
Mhm.
I've learned from a few sources that the idea that consciousness informs itself through its creations, and I believe that if that's true, that the one wholeness of all that is, that one energy, the isness, the great I am, whatever you want to call it, if that consciousness were to insert and inject fractals of itself into every living thing, trillions and trillions of all those living things. In that case, we are one as consciousness and energy. And what a better way to absorb massive amounts, infinite amounts of information, simultaneously living out all these life experiences at one moment in time, right?
Yeah.
But consciousness is an interesting topic. Tom Campbell talks about it in his trilogy, My Big Toe. Huge books. I've gotten halfway through the first one. I'm just mind blown by the guy's rhetoric and vocabulary. He's brilliant. He did work with Bob Monroe, um, and they created a way to intentionally have out of body experiences.
Hmm.
And the Army, the CIA, the government, they've used these methods to remote view and literally save children's lives, find downed aircraft that had top secret information. I mean, they utilize this and they think about consciousness differently than most people do. Like we identify as this body. Oh, yeah, I'm Pete Jones. I'm a podcaster. This is my identity.
Hmm.
But the truest form of our identity is eternal and divine. And I really believe that now. And there's something called the Gateway tapes on YouTube It's got 53 series of guided meditations with certain noises and vibrations, different frequencies at just the right hertz and difference
Mhm.
that will make your brain like congeal into one like thought pattern, and
Mhm.
you can utilize it as a tool to literally have an out-of-body experience. Now, I've listened to hundreds of near-death experiences. I start every day by listening to two or three of them just
Mhm.
because it brings me so much peace, right? And I've heard so many incredible experiences, and they're all unique to that individual's human experience, what
Right.
they experience in their post life. And some of them, like Buddha Betty on Instagram, she's described how she left her body and experienced her pre-Earth life. And she was in a grocery store, and this guide was saying, okay, now you get to pick out all the life experiences you're going to have, right? And
Mhm.
so she goes through and, well, hell, I want to have them all. And there's a big grocery cart, and she just shoveled every one of the experiences into the cart. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you, man, hearing her experience, she's experienced a lot.
Yeah.
And for someone to come back and create a life that can contribute to the greater good of the collective whole just by telling her story, that was truly inspiring. I love near-death experiences. They're so comforting.
Yeah.
And
And maybe it's just that through death we can increase our knowledge of our collective consciousness, just because the more you understand death, the more you realize how connected you are with people.
mhm,
That you're part of something bigger, whether you like it or not.
yeah.
Even if it's just death that is that big mystery that you don't understand, you're a part of it.
Yeah, they've got magnetic spectrometers that can now measure very limitedly in their capacity, but they can measure this force of love, and it's an energetic vibrational frequency like
Mm.
15 to 30 feet out from the body. And
Mm.
being raised in the same religion as you, I grew up Mormon, went on a mission, did the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um, I remember thinking and kind of believing and sort of being taught by certain individuals as I was growing up that the spirit is inhabited within the body.
Mm.
And now, according to ancient traditions and other religions and societies, I realize it's possible that the spirit is actually not inhabited within the body, but it's this massive energy that interacts with all the energies around it at all times that
Mhm.
sort of animates this human experience for us. We're massive, we're limitless, and interconnected and intertwined throughout the universe with everything else
Yeah.
as this orb of energy.
Right.
And I loved that idea, but the study of consciousness has just informed me that I don't know shit, basically. And it's fun to talk about and think about, but what we've discussed today can be utilized by anyone as an empowerment tool to really create a life that is devoid of fear and pain and suffering in the future. And I love what you've shared. I really appreciate it. I do have, uh, if you have the time for it, I've got 20 questions that if I could ask them and we could just fire away and go through these 20, I think that
Yeah.
it might benefit a lot of people that wouldn't even think to ask these questions, right?
Yeah.
And we'll start with this one. What first called you to this path of becoming a death doula, and how has your own life experience shaped the ways you serve others? I mean, you kind of went into detail on all this, but what would a quick answer be?
Um, Curiosity.
I love it. One word.
Yep, curiosity and the dark feminine.
I love that, which is a good thing, as we
Yes,
discussed.
it is.
For those unfamiliar, how would you describe what a death doula does in simple human terms?
A death doula is a non-medical professional who supports those dying or their loved ones, either holistically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, in any way to achieve the ideal death.
Perfect. What misconceptions do people usually have about death, dying, and the role of a death doula?
That it should be avoided at all costs, that we're negative and sad, that we um, don't have fun with the process of supporting someone in death, and that they will become more depressed if they think about their own death.
Nice. What do you believe is so important for individuals and families to consciously prepare for death rather than avoid the subject?
Mhm. It will be sometimes the final gift you give your loved ones if you're able to prepare a little bit of time ahead of something that is, it's okay to call it unfortunate or devastating, but that we know it's coming. And so what we know is coming, we prepare for. So,
Uh,
and it'll be spiritually deepening as well.
Oh, yeah, I love that. What does a peaceful death truly mean to you, and what are some of the elements that help create it?
A peaceful death doesn't mean exactly that it is without discomfort. There's a difference between pain and suffering, by the way. You might have some pain, just like how if someone would scoff if I said I want a painless birth. Um, but I can have a birth that is void of distress, fear, anxiety. I could have done everything in my power to prepare for the end of it so that I can truly just sink into the experience, which we know the brain releases some pretty cool neurons, and it could even be the weirdest trip of our lives. But if we're blocking it with the distress and fear, then we go into a pretty high distress death state. So,
That's awesome. You know, in the neurochemicals and minerals and things that are introduced into the body, you know, we now know that there's like anywhere from 600 to 1200 chemicals constantly being pumped into our bodies from our brain, and it creates a chemical cocktail within us, and just from thinking alone.
yeah, yeah.
And
Things are
that's
pretty trippy.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
How can conversation about death actually lead to living a fuller, more meaningful life?
Well, think about what you wouldn't have to spend time fearing, and then you have all this extra space to actually live. Um, and then openly talking about it and knowing that people know your values and would represent you as very supportive representatives and make sure that your death is done the way that you'd like it, then essentially you get to work backwards. So you get to have that all settled so that you can really rest in the present moment of your life and celebrate it.
Nice. No,
You don't fear aging as much, by the way.
and that makes life better in and of itself.
Yeah.
We're severely inundated by social media, the news, and so many, you know,
Mhm.
places of fear. You know, and most people create a life from a place of fear, but when we're able to start creating from a place of loving compassion and peace and calmness,
Mhm.
things change magically overnight. I mean, it's unreal.
And I don't live without fear. I just elbow it to the side,
Nice. I like that.
make my own room.
Yeah, we all have fear, that's for sure. We all get caught up in the whole human experience, and fear is a big part of it. You know, that's okay.
Mhm.
What are some of the most common fears people face when approaching death, and how do you help them move through those fears?
They wonder what it's going to feel like and they think it'll hurt. They think that it will be really scary. But like I said, if you read any book on what has been at least witnessed, a lot of people go after a lot of time of rest and a lot of time of in and out of very deep unconsciousness, and that usually people are not fully conscious when they actually die. They're
Mhm.
somewhere else. They're experiencing something as they die, and
Yeah,
it's not exactly completely in the body. So it's if you've ever seen it, which again very few people have, it's so peaceful and so restful.
it is. And it's
And that's the average death. Obviously, there's traumatic death, but that's not what I'm referring to.
for sure. I remember one time, I mean, for about 10 years total, I've been in the non-emergency handicap transportation business, right?
Mhm.
I'd picked this woman up. She was 94, and told me, the nurses told me she's probably not going to make it back to the nursing home. And I was like, okay, thanks for preparing me. You know, that's good. And I just was speaking with her, looking her right in the eyes. It was a beautiful experience. And I get her in the stretcher and tied her down in there. And I tied her in a way that I could look her in the eyes through the rearview mirror.
Mhm.
And I was with her when she took her last breath.
Mm.
And it was spiritual. It was such a I felt her energy blow right through me, as if she were trying to race to the nursing home and be there.
Right, right.
And when I got there, I unloaded it and I said, "Hey, just so you know, she just passed away on the way here." And nurses everywhere, they loved her so much. You could tell they were taking such good care of her. They just started bawling, and oh, we have to hurry and get her ready for the family to see her. It was a beautiful experience.
And everyone loves to joke about dying alone. You don't die alone.
I agree.
Only in very weird circumstances does that happen. Even the people who think that they're, quite the gruff antisocial person, they die with a community.
Mhm.
So you won't die alone. I think everyone can stop saying that phrase
I
when
like
they're
that.
joking about not being able to date very well or something.
Yeah, there was another gal. She was 33 at the time, and she was staying in the nursing home. She had just got both of her legs cut off because she was going through dialysis. She had type 2 diabetes. It was poor health, and she had just gotten some dental work, and they were like, man, the mom was in the vehicle. We were joking around. She was flirting with me. She was a sweet, sweet girl. And the next day, I went in there to take her to her dialysis appointment.
Mhm.
And I walk into the room and I said, "Are you ready?" I was so excited to see her. She was just fun personality. And she had just sneezed and dislodged a blood clot and died instantly
Oh
right in
wow.
front of me.
Oh my
And
goodness.
that was rough. That was,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
and experiencing that was a little rougher than the last one, of course. But
Yeah.
what a beautiful family she had. What a beautiful life she had lived and beautiful soul that she was. You could just feel the love in the family. And I talked with them afterwards for hours, and it was a good experience as well.
Good. Yeah.
There was one time I took a young man. He was 22, beautiful blonde boy with blue eyes, and he was dying of AIDS. It was in the 90s,
Hmm.
and I was taking him to a hospice center, and he said, "My dad's a bishop. My mom is a Relief Society president. I've got 8 brothers and sisters, and they won't even talk to me."
Hmm.
And I hated hearing that. I
Hmm.
gave him a big hug when I dropped him off.
Yeah.
And he just said, "Thank you." And I just hope that he was able to reconnect with his family and send him love, and went on my way to the next one. But
Yeah.
can you speak to the importance of family and community when it comes to such situations?
Well, with parents, it's a really, really hard one. Obviously, because they're witnessing uh, just the impossible. You never imagine a child dying when you have one. You would rather die first, obviously, and things like that. But to speak honestly about the situation, because they're hearing you talk about them, and if you were to say up front, my son is dying and he has not much time left, so here's what we're doing to make the best of that time. It's way better than, we're praying and we're going to do a lot for this boy. And my only real rule here, I don't have advice because I'm also not a parent yet, um that isn't to be taken with a grain of salt, but I do have some advice, and it's essentially that when it comes to hope can always be a moving target. So I hope that this cancer treatment works. I'm so sorry it didn't. I hope that when he has his last day with his friends, that we can do something super fun. Oh, it went really well. Now what? Now there's new hope to have. Oh, well, I hope that when he dies, it's painless and that he gets to rest. Oh, that's a beautiful hope. So when people say, have hope, have faith, like, yeah, cool, but hope is not the problem. It's what people think hope means. It's just to stay alive. And you don't have any control over that. So then you're called hopeless if you say he's dying. And they say, what a faithless thing to say. Don't you have faith your son would survive? And it's like, hmm, now we know who we're talking to. If someone thinks that just radically saying that all the medical and physiological markers are there that shows that he is going to die soon. And to say that out loud is not faithless. It's faithful that we get to embrace a truth, and then we get to have new little bits of hope of, okay, well, we have only a little bit of time left. Let's make sure we can have a really fun day in the hospital today. That's my hope. something like that. So parents have to find elevations of that hope.
And while navigating grief and suffering and pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Can you share an example of a ritual, a practice, or conversation that deeply shifted a family's experience of death?
Yeah. Essentially, I was working with a family who is very open-minded, um, and they went around and they all talked about the thing that they would do that would remind them of that person, and it's very unique. So meaning the person was there and hearing it, and they got to see how funny it was that the little things they did were communicated to their children. I don't really remember specifics, but even in my life, it's something like if I use my dad, for example, I'll think of him every time I see a date palm,
Hmm.
this very specific blue mechanical pencil that he always kept in his pocket. For my mom, I'll think of a specific type of flower arrangement that she would make, or I would think of, even if I smell flowers because she's a florist. For some of my siblings, they have certain quirks that I will just think of them. Like one of my brothers, my hand looks very much like their hand.
Hmm.
It's weird, but I sometimes have long nails, and when I cut them short, I said, "Well, that's my brother. I'll have my brother in my hand." So
Yeah.
like, they went around the circle, and something as simple as that, we're like, "Oh, well, when I have that specific ice cream, that's you and me. I'm going to be thinking of you." And just to have their dad hear that, of all the siblings, oh, he was just in tears, because you don't think that have an effect on other people without founding some huge nonprofit and affecting the world in some huge way.
Mhm.
Just you having a favorite ice cream, having a preferred mechanical pencil, and you liking to plant date palms. I don't know what mine will be, right? I could ask people, what's going to make you think of me. And it's a beautiful way to show that you have been rippling into people's lives in small ways this whole time. And even that was alone, just the coolest little ritual that the dad got to hear his kids would do when he was gone. It's simple. I didn't get all hippy dippy with it. We just talked about little things, but I mean, they were all sobbing by the end. So that was really fun. So start asking people what little things they're going to think of, or be, or what will remind you of them, or them of you, and things like that.
What a gift that would be too, that how connecting. It seems like something so small, but all those small things compound and compile into something just massive. That's genius.
Mhm.
Death and it is experienced differently across cultures and traditions. What wisdom have you learned from these diverse perspectives?
I love the idea that there's something in the homes of those who grew up in a Mexican or kind of a Hispanic culture, where they can
Mhm.
have ofrendas, I think that's what they're called. And when they celebrate Dios de los Muertos, they have um, there's a special word for it, but a lot of people just call it a shrine, right? That there's a beautiful corner of their home with pictures and their favorite foods and special flowers that represent death and things like that. Um, and yes, they go decorate the grave, but there's something in the home that gets to be the living grave of that person, or the living monument of that person. And so I think if a lot of people embrace the idea that you need a small corner to beautify your grief and make it something approachable and even beautiful, then that would be really cool. So I really love that about the Hispanic culture.
I do too. I married a beautiful Latina gal, and her family's huge. It's really big, like mine. And so we have so many opportunities to experience these things in that culture, and I just love it. It's my favorite thing.
So
That's cool.
super, yeah.
How do you hold space for both the spiritual and the practical aspects of dying?
Um, I would read more books, like the book that you read from Julie McFadden.
Mhm.
That's a really good one because she comes from a nursing background, but she is also curious spiritually herself about what happens at death. Just read about it. Like if you have any curiosity about, usually the books say something like, a gentle passage. Hers is nothing to fear. Something like that, where it's like, hey, it's your choice to enter into that state of learning where someone explains the natural and biological process of dying, and that it's really not that scary, and it's not something you can watch on TV and learn about. You have to really learn from people who have been witness to death, or you have to be open to witnessing death yourself. People would go so far as to volunteering for a hospice to just expose themselves, which any volunteering you can do for a hospice would be fantastic. If you play an instrument, if you can come and even just spend time with those who are dying. Talk about a spiritual practice. You don't need to hike to some mountain and sit zen like for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the local hospice.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that was even available to the general public.
They train you in about half a day. You go in, you just make sure you know how to do it in a way that's safe, and then you're just on a little sign up sheet to go spend time with people and talk to them.
I love that. And I love speaking to the elder generations about their life stories, and so many lessons that can be taught and learned through communication of stories.
Yeah.
What role do you see grief playing in our lives, not just after death, but as a part of being human?
Well, it's unavoidable. So there's that. And then the idea that we're all going to experience it and witness it. It's something that we could either fight or we can allow to transform our human empathy or our depth of empathy. And it's the idea that this is going to sound kind of harsh, but you're not unique in your grief. Start seeing how much grief is happening around you. Start considering it to be a communal force, because everyone has a story of grief. And so even my grievers, I say connect to people who are going through something similar, and you'll find that you're just part of the tapestry of human experiences. So it doesn't have to be essentially your whole identity if you don't want it to be. It's just kind of like, yes, it's a fingerprint, but also every single person has to go through it. And the fun part is, this is not fun at all, but I get kind of sarcastic. If grievers get kind of negative when they say like, well, no one else understands this, and I say, it's a matter of time. Like, the fact that they don't understand it, everyone will go through this. So you don't have to worry about necessarily if someone's not ready to hold space for you, just move on, because someday they're going to think of you when they're going through it for the first time themselves. So that's my little 2 cents. It's just something we all get to prepare for.
I love that. Thank you. In your experience, what happens when people begin to see death not as an ending, but as part of a natural cycle?
It gets medicalized less. They get to trust a sort of older wisdom around how death was handled in the long run of human existence. It gets to be something transformative instead of just solemn and depressing. We get to have celebrations of the person instead of fear of the death. And the person gets to not be lost in the fear. We get to finally kind of see them in a very childlike state, just because you'd even hear that older people become more and more childlike the more they get to the end of their lives. So it's a tender process, and it becomes almost, you get to mother a little bit. People would describe getting really close to their parents in a way that they never thought they would if they held space for the dying process.
We're sort of experiencing that now. 2 years ago, my mother-in-law had a lung removed along with a tumor that was the size of a volleyball, right?
Oh, wow.
And the doctor, we said, hey, can we see a before and after picture? And he's like, what? Really? And he's like, yeah, and he showed it to us, and we were like, wow, he did a really incredible job. He got every bit of it. It was amazing.
Wow.
But for 3 months after that, we lived with her. And well, for 8 months after that. We lived with her, but the first 3 months, my wife took off work and she was able to be with her mom 24/7.
Mm.
Oh, what an experience. It was beautiful. But I see what you're saying because at one point my wife told her, I wish I could be your mother and give you all the love you deserve.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I get a little emotional on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, what lessons do the dying often leave behind for the living?
Oh, I don't even, I can't even put words to that. A million and more. I don't know how to quantify it. The lessons that we can learn from the dying. One is that idea of the ripples, that the ripples have never ended. Like if you have a still lake and one dropped into the water, the ripples would never end. Um, and the idea that someone could even be more present in your life when they're gone than they were when they were living.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I talk with grievers, we talk about an enduring relationship with them, that believe it or not, your relationship will mature even. Then we talk about re-grief. So I got like a client at 15 years old, and I got him off of a lot of dysfunctional behaviors like sneaking out and drugs and
Mm-hmm.
lots of weird things because I mean, his mom overdosed. It's like not, you just cope with it any way you can when you're 15 years old.
Right.
But we got him to a really lovely place where he was coping really well with his grief and he was really growing. And then all of a sudden, right before high school graduation, he had just turned 18. All of it came back. He was starting to do some dysfunctional behaviors again. And I said, did you know that there's something called re-grief? And it's the idea that your grief grows up with you. And at 15, he was grieving a certain way. And guess what his grief has to do now? When he's looking at the adult world, he should have had his mom to help him graduate high school. She was supposed to be there and proud of him and helping him learn how to navigate the scary world of college and jobs and car insurance and all this stuff. But she wasn't, and he was pissed off. And guess what? The first time he gets married or has a kid, he's going to have to invite grief back and do re-grief. So the dead grow up with us, and they mature with us if you're willing to have a relationship with them. But your grief will take care of it for you essentially if you don't want to acknowledge that. And I just think people's stories of how they've lived, but then how they even, ended their lives is so inspiring. Um, and people die how they lived. Like I kind of say, I mean, not to throw out hot words, but like if you were a narcissist in life, you're going to probably die a narcissist. um,
Yeah, we've seen that.
and there's some people that really turn a leaf,
Mm-hmm.
and death is quite the transformative power. And the older they get, the softer they get, things like that. But, but really, the death of someone is the death of so many parts of themselves that sometimes we could be left with the childlike soft version of them, or those things, they die prominent, those personality disorders, those bitter harsh parts that can't be masked or suppressed anymore. And so a lot of people learn through the death process kind of how to either find some closure from some hard people in their lives. And that's a really weird part to talk about with some people, is that they'll even find a little bit of relief that in death they can finally get close to a person that in life it was too hard.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting part too, that even in death it allows maybe a closer relationship for some people, and that's unique, but it's possible.
What a gift. Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to that young man that you were working with, I believe it's not only possible, but highly likely that the energy of his mother was with him every step along the way,
Yeah,
rooting him on, supporting, cheering.
totally, totally.
Okay, we've got just five more. What is one thing you wish everyone would do now to prepare themselves and their families for a peaceful death? We kind of covered that, but
Mhm.
we can, sir.
I'll add kind of a snarky one, and it's just please say death more often.
Hmm.
Don't say pass away or that grandma is sick. Just say grandma is dying. Grandma only has a couple weeks left because her body will stop living. That means her heart stops beating, and she won't be alive anymore. Talk to your kids about death because they are going to have to learn through lots of painful experiences if you don't do it from a place of love. So just start talking about your own death with just honest words, and your body will actually allow it, and it'll become these mini bits of desensitization that we can do as a society to stop making death a taboo thing.
Love it. How can people begin having these conversations with loved ones who may be uncomfortable talking about death?
Start with asking a loved one if there's anything specific they would like to have around them when they die. If you have a mom that's elderly, say, you know what I was thinking the other day? If it gets to the point that, you're pretty old and it's hard for you to talk, what's your favorite song to listen to? I want to listen to that song with you. Or, if I wanted to bring you flowers, I never really asked you, what was your favorite flower to have around? If you're speaking to someone who mostly likes to talk about old stories, you'd say, you know what, I've maybe heard a lot, but I want to ask specifically maybe one of the hardest things you went through when you were young and what you learned from it, because I think that's way cooler than just, I know you went on a mission, I know you married grandma, I know you had 4 kids, but tell me something else. I want to hear kind of some hard challenges that you went through. And people
Mm.
get talking, then, and all of a sudden, you kind of hear their values come out, and that's what you could really respect in their death process, is just who they are. They're a real individual that won't exist after they're gone in that specific form, so be curious about them.
Love it. What resources, tools, or practices do you recommend for those who want to face mortality with more peace and courage?
So if you want to get into it officially, just as a one who wants to do their own work, go to the National End of Life Doula Association and find a local doula around you. They have it for any state, and they often offer virtual, just like I would. And if you want me to, I'm more of a specialist with Arizona and Utah. But there's people who are local, if you're just anywhere around, that you would go and find that expert. Just invest in it. Help yourself by hiring someone to just do this process with you and be done with it. Well, done as in you would do your paperwork, but then have Death and Grief be a coach, a long life coach. Um, and then I would say, when it comes to more curiosity around this, if you want to even work in the death field, I would say just look up your nearest hospice, see if they have a way to volunteer, and see if you can even do that just once or twice a year. And that would be more education, more training, more opportunities to see things with empathetic and human eyes that you don't have. I mean, you just won't get that out of a book. Like, you could read books about end of life all you want, but you have to feel it with your body to know, almost as if you could practice for when that might happen to a family member. You'd be calm because you've been training. So, and by the way, your kids are not as afraid of death as you are. So take them to volunteer at the hospice facility, take them to the nursing homes so that they can see the old people are just sweet and kind and not to be afraid of. They're afraid if you're afraid.
Mhm.
So don't be weird. Just teach your kids that this is a natural part of society, and we don't shut it behind curtains and not give them any attention and love.
No, nothing to be hidden.
Yeah.
How can people connect with you?
I do have a website. The website is a bit under construction because I'm trying to make it pretty robust, but it's channelingexpansion.com. If you live in Utah, I can give you clinical services, meaning if you have insurance, I take all the major insurances.
Mm.
If not, I have a very affordable sliding scale rate of anyone who just wants a little bit of coaching through something, especially if you are facing the death of a loved one, or you yourself are facing a chronic or terminal illness. I have a certain link on my website that it kind of tags you to what's called a simple practice portal, which is how I manage my clinical clients. but just say you want coaching. If you don't live in Utah and you can't use insurance or anything, just say that you want to get a hold of me, and I will respond within 24 hours, and we'll have a free consultation, 20 to 30 minutes, to see if I can help you.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Two more questions. If you could leave one message for the world about death and dying, what would it be?
Oh, well, um, I've said so much already, but if I could summarize it, it's that if people could face this more often, they would be healing more than they think in the world. So don't underestimate the bravery that it takes to face this, because it'll ripple and heal parts of the world. It's essentially saying what could happen if people could become softer and more empathetic. Anything. And that's what death does for me. It makes me soft. It makes me um, patient and calm, and also it makes me live bigger. So
Nice. And then to wrap it up with the final question, how do you envision the role of death doulas and conscious death preparation evolving in the future?
part of me just wants to talk about the thing you touched on, that it's gonna maybe at some point involve some psychedelics, so that people can even like halfway experience the embrace of death without actually doing it, almost like we get some sort of simulation. By the way, I haven't done it yet.
Mm.
If anyone wants to let me know how that's been, if it was the purpose of approaching a fear of death, let me know. Because I've read a lot of accounts and it's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably going to happen in the future. And then I think that death doulas will hopefully at some point have a very respected role in the death industry in general, meaning that they might be part of a hospice team. They might be part of a hospital system that someone can then talk to someone who is not as busy as maybe a social worker, but they can come and talk about end of life prep with something that could even help the general family, not just the person dying. Um, I would love for death doulas to get more attention in our ability to really change the paradigm in terms of fear, also to even combat little things like the fear of aging. The more comfortable we are with the process of death, the more we're connected to our cultures. Um, and then when it comes to the fact that like it's a little bit weird to ask for money to be paid for what I do. The more that people talk about it, the more it could be, a real discipline that I've studied and trained a lot for, and that I could even make a living to support my family with. If it's respected in that role, then it'll help more death doulas see that they still have to survive and make a living out of this. And it's something we love to do, but we do have to find a way to live and buy our food. So it's just the more we talk about it, the more it could be a legitimate role in society.
I love that. Love everything that you've said here today. And I'm so excited to get this out to the general public because it's something that's under discussed and not really focused on until it's an emergency.
Mm.
I really appreciate you coming on the show today and being a guest. I know that I've seen like on Facebook and different things that you do help with GoFundMe accounts for people that really need help. Is there a link on your website to current GoFundMe accounts?
So it was actually amazing. The one I put on, it was met or maxed, or the total that we had set out
Mhm.
was actually met for my current death doula client by my old one.
Nice.
So, she essentially paid for the cremation costs and the funeral costs of my second death doula client. So it was like a beautiful charitable chain, So actually not right now, because that was generously donated and met. But it would be really nice if I ever have a particular story of someone I'm serving in the community, and if they could be buoyed up by your community, that would be wonderful. So I'll let you know if any come up.
Awesome. Very good. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe and let's share the hell out of this information because every single one of us can gain something from this episode. I really believe that. Is there anything that you'd like to say to everyone before we close?
Yeah, just thank you for having me on. It's a brave episode to listen to, even by the title. I'm assuming someone would have to kind of feel a little uncomfy even just clicking on the link, just because anything about death is not the most exciting to listen to, but I promise there's a magic in it. And then on a more practical note, just because I'll be giving birth near October, if you need anything soon, contact me fast because I'll be taking 3-month maternity leave. But if that doesn't happen, I'll be back up and running for any coaching or support come like next January or February.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you so much, Cammy.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey guys, this is Pete Jones with Good in the Head. I just listened to another great episode on the Good in the Head podcast with Camille Miskin. It's a topic that is difficult for many to address or skirt, but it's one that we're all going to deal with sooner or later. And what she's shared with us today has been so incredible. I just really hope that you loved it as much as I did. Again, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let's get this information out to everyone because this is something that everyone sooner or later will absolutely need. And I love the idea of being prepared and creating and living a life that isn't based within fear, but with gentle compassion and love for yourself and others. I really love that. I invite you to go to the website at goodinthehead.com. Click on the menu, explore. I've got plenty of books for sale. A series I just came out with. It's called Beyond Triggers. I've got the first 3 in the series complete. Number 3 is a pretty robust book. It's thick. It's almost 400 pages long, and it's all about relationship-based triggers. We've all got relationships, and this book is a huge help. It was like going to about 6 or 7 years of therapy, just writing it and putting it out there and editing it. It was a lot of fun. Hope you enjoy. I wish you all peace and love in your own lives, and thanks again for listening.